Red emergency lights flashed across Proxima Station as another explosion rocked the massive structure. Fleet Admiral John Carter grabbed the edge of the command table to steady himself. He looked at the holographic display, showing the remaining human ships fighting against the overwhelming Xorian forces. "Status report," he ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos. Commander Lisa Young tapped on her console, pulling up the latest battle data. Her face was tired, with dark circles under her eyes from days without proper sleep. "Not good, sir. The outer defense line is broken. We have 8 ships still operational, but they're outnumbered 20 to 1. Station shields are at 37% and falling." The Admiral nodded slowly. "How long can we hold out?" 6 hours at most," Lisa replied. "After that, the shields will fail, and they'll board the station." The command center fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The Xorians never took prisoners. In the 10 years since first contact, the silicon-based aliens had destroyed dozens of human colonies. Billions of people had died. Now, they were closing in on humanity's last major outpost. "Sir," a voice spoke up from across the room. "I might have an idea." Admiral Carter turned to see Strategic Officer Peter Mills approaching with a data tablet. The young man looked nervous but determined. "What is it, Mills?" "There's a protocol, sir. One that was created for exactly this kind of situation, when all hope seems lost." Peter handed over the tablet. "Emergency Directive 119. The Admiral's eyebrows rose as he read the document. "A quantum beacon. I've never heard of this technology. It was experimental, developed just before the war started," explained Peter. "The idea was to create a signal that could reach across both space and time to call for help from any available human ships." Lisa looked skeptical. "Across time? That's impossible." "The science team believed it could work in theory," Peter continued. "The beacon creates quantum entanglement pulses that exist outside normal spacetime. Any ship with the right receivers could potentially detect it, no matter when or where they are." The station shook again as another Xorian blast hit the shields. A support beam crashed down at the far end of the command center, injuring 2 officers. Admiral Carter helped a wounded technician to a chair before turning back to Peter. "Was it ever tested?" "No, sir. The project was shelved when the war intensified. All resources were diverted to weapons development." The Admiral walked slowly to the main view screen. It showed the vast darkness of space, punctuated by explosions as human ships fought and died defending the station. Earth was too far away to send help in time. This outpost was humanity's last line of defense before their homeworld. "Do we have the equipment to activate this beacon?" he asked. Peter nodded. "Yes, sir. The prototype was installed in the station's central communications array. It would take about 30 minutes to bring it online." Admiral Carter looked around at the faces of his crew. They were afraid but still fighting, still believing in the impossible. Humanity had always survived against the odds. "Make it happen," he ordered. "Get that beacon working." "Sir," Lisa interrupted, "you realize this is almost certainly futile. Even if the beacon works as designed, who would receive it? Every ship we have is either here or defending Earth." The Admiral smiled sadly. "Sometimes all we have left is hope, Commander. Besides, throughout human history, our greatest victories have come when defeat seemed certain." As Peter rushed off to activate the beacon, Admiral Carter returned to the battle display. The Xorian fleet was moving into position for their final assault. Massive warships with crystalline structures that glittered like stars were forming a ring around the station. "All remaining ships, focus fire on the lead vessel," he commanded. "We need to buy time." The human vessels, small and agile compared to the alien behemoths, darted forward on what was essentially a suicide run. They would distract the enemy while the beacon was prepared. In the depths of the station, Peter Mills and a team of engineers worked frantically to activate technology that had never been used before. The quantum beacon hummed to life, its energy coils glowing with an eerie blue light. "Ready, sir," Peter reported over the comm. Admiral Carter took a deep breath. Activated. The beacon pulsed once, twice, and then sent out a continuous signal into the void, a desperate call for help that stretched across the stars and beyond the boundaries of time itself. 3 days before the attack on Proxima Station, astronomer Frank Howard drifted lazily through the cabin of his small research vessel. The Lucky Star wasn't much to look at, just an old survey ship that had seen better days. But it was perfect for his work searching for resource-rich asteroids in the cerulean void. Frank floated to his scanner console and frowned at the readings. Something unusual was showing up at the edge of his detection range. Computer, analyze anomaly at coordinates 227 to 4893, he said, reaching for his coffee mug. The liquid inside formed perfect spheres that he caught with his mouth. Analysis complete, the computer responded. Unknown energy signature detected. No match found in database. Frank sat up straighter. New discoveries meant bonus pay, and he could use the extra credits. Direct course to the anomaly. Standard approach. The engines hummed as the ship changed direction. Frank watched through the view screen as stars slid past. Whatever this anomaly was, it wasn't visible to the naked eye. Meanwhile, on Earth, in the small coastal town of Newport, Grace Sullivan walked along the beach near her home. At 53, the retired Navy captain still had the straight posture and alert eyes of someone used to command. The cool morning air filled her lungs as waves crashed against the shore. 15 years had passed since she had lost her ship and crew. 15 years since the U.S. Defiant, Earth's most powerful warship, had vanished without a trace during a classified mission. Grace had only survived because she'd been called back to Earth for her mother's funeral just days before the mission. Sometimes she still woke up screaming, imagining what her crew had gone through in their final moments. Other times, she would stare at the stars and wonder if they might somehow still be out there. Grace noticed a black car parked at the end of the beach path. A man in a dark uniform leaned against it, watching her. Military intelligence, she guessed, recognizing the stance. She sighed and walked toward him. Captain Sullivan. The man greeted her, offering his hand. I'm Intelligence Officer Daniel Wright. We need to talk. Grace crossed her arms. I'm retired, Officer Wright. Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying. Wright didn't smile. He opened a small case and pulled out a data tablet. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring stations picked up this energy signature. Grace took the tablet reluctantly. The screen showed a wavelength pattern that made her heart stop. This is impossible, she whispered. We ran it through the database 6 times, Wright said. It's a perfect match for the Defiant's propulsion system. The ship's unique warp signature is unmistakable. Grace handed the tablet back, her hand slightly shaking. The Defiant was destroyed 15 years ago. Apparently not. Wright nodded toward his car. There's a transport waiting to take us to Space Command. Admiral Wilson wants to brief you personally. Why me? Because you're the only senior officer from the Defiant still alive, Captain. And because if that really is your ship out there, we need someone who knows it inside and out. Back in the cerulean void, Frank Howard's ship drew closer to the anomaly. His instruments were going crazy, showing energy readings that made no sense. Computer, full stop, he ordered. Keep us at a safe distance. The anomaly was growing, a distortion in space that warped the starlight around it. Frank had never seen anything like it. He activated all his sensors and began recording data. This is incredible, he muttered to himself. Some kind of spatial rift. Without warning, the anomaly expanded dramatically. Frank's ship rocked violently as space itself seemed to tear open before him. He grabbed his console to steady himself. Computer, emergency thrusters. But before he could retreat to a safe distance, something massive began emerging from the rift. Frank stared in awe as a ship appeared. A huge vessel, its hull scarred and damaged. Unmistakably human in design. The ship was at least 4 times larger than his small research vessel. Its hull bore the markings of Earth's deep space fleet and a name that Frank recognized immediately from history lessons: U.S. Defiant. "That's impossible," Frank whispered, staring at a ghost from the past floating silently before him. "That ship disappeared 15 years ago." His communication console beeped with an incoming signal. With trembling hands, Frank opened the channel. Frank Howard's hands shook as he opened the communication channel. The massive warship floating before him seemed like something from a dream, a ghost ship that had returned from the dead. "This is Frank Howard of the research vessel Lucky Star," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "U.S. Defiant, do you read me?" Static filled the channel. Frank repeated his message, adjusting the frequency. More static, then a faint voice broke through. "Require immediate casualties. Systems failing." Frank leaned closer to his console. "U.S. Defiant, I can barely hear you. Please adjust your communication array." After several tense minutes, the signal cleared. A woman's voice came through, professional but strained. "This is Communications Officer Amy Nichols of the U.S. Defiant. We have multiple hull breaches and critical system failures. Our medical bay is overwhelmed with injured personnel." Frank swallowed hard. "Officer Nichols, I'm showing that the U.S. Defiant was lost 15 years ago. Can you explain?" A long pause followed. "That's impossible," Amy finally replied. "We were just engaged in combat with an unknown alien force. Our chronometers show the date as March 12, 2310. Frank checked his own display. March 15, 2325. Somehow, the Defiant had jumped 15 years through time. "I need to speak with your commanding officer," Frank said. "Captain Evans and most of our senior officers were killed in the battle," Amy responded. "Lieutenant Commander Ben Russell is the highest-ranking officer still alive." Minutes later, a man's tired voice came over the channel. "This is Lieutenant Commander Russell. Who am I speaking with?" Frank explained the situation as best he could. Russell sounded disoriented, but maintained his composure when told that 15 years had passed in what seemed like hours to the Defiant's crew. "We need emergency assistance," Russell said. "Our life support systems are failing." "I'll escort you to the nearest outpost," Frank replied. "Follow my lead." Meanwhile, at Earth Space Command Headquarters, Grace Sullivan stood in stunned silence as Admiral Wilson showed her the latest data. "The signal is confirmed," the Admiral said. "It's definitely the Defiant. A research vessel made contact with it near the Cerulean Void. They're en route to Outpost 47. Grace studied the damage reports coming in. The ship had taken heavy damage, but it was still operational, still alive, just like she had dreamed for 15 years. "How is this possible?" she asked. "Some kind of temporal displacement," Admiral Wilson replied. "Our scientists are working on it. What matters now is that the Defiant has technologies we desperately need in our fight against the Xorians." Grace looked up sharply. "Xorians? The aliens who attacked the Defiant 15 years ago. We didn't know who they were then, but we do now. They've been at war with us for a decade." Grace felt a chill run down her spine. The classified mission. The Defiant was sent to investigate an unknown object near Saturn's rings. That was first contact with these Xorians. The Admiral nodded. "The Defiant damaged several of their scout ships before disappearing. It gave us valuable time to prepare, but not enough. We're losing the war, Grace." A young officer entered the room and saluted. "Sir, the transport to Outpost 47 is ready." 3 hours later, Grace stepped off the military transport at Outpost 47. The station buzzed with more activity than she had seen in years. Everyone was talking about the miracle ship that had returned. She made her way to the medical wing where the Defiant's crew was being treated. Her heart pounded in her chest. These were people she had commanded, people she had mourned for 15 years. To them, they had just seen her days ago. The door slid open. Inside, dozens of crew members sat on beds or stood in small groups. They looked battle-worn but alive. A tall man with a bandaged head noticed her first. His eyes widened in recognition. Captain Sullivan. One by one, heads turned toward her. Faces she knew so well, faces that hadn't aged a day, stared back at her in shock. Lieutenant Commander Ben Russell stepped forward, moving with the help of a cane. Captain, we thought you were on Earth for your mother's funeral. Grace felt tears in her eyes, but kept her composure. I was. For me, that was 15 years ago. The room fell silent as the reality of their situation hit home. These men and women were now strangers in a time they didn't belong to. Everyone they had known outside the ship, families, friends, loved ones, had lived 15 years without them. What happens now? Ben asked quietly. Grace straightened her shoulders, falling back into the role of their captain. Now we figure out how to get the Defiant battle ready again. Because from what I hear, humanity needs you, needs us, more than ever. The next morning, Grace Sullivan stood in the observation room of Outpost 47, looking through the large window at the U.S. Defiant. Maintenance drones swarmed around the massive ship, assessing damage and beginning repairs. Despite the battle scars and burn marks on its hull, the warship looked powerful and proud. It's strange seeing her again, said a voice behind her. Grace turned to find Engineer Joe Ramirez entering the room. His arm was in a sling, and a bandage covered one side of his face, but his eyes were bright and alert. Joe, Grace smiled, genuinely happy to see her old friend. How are you feeling? Better than some, he replied, moving to stand beside her at the window. The doctors say most of us will recover fully. We lost 47 good people in that battle, though. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the work on the ship. I've been reading about the last 15 years, Joe said finally. This war with the Xorians. Hard to believe those were the same aliens we encountered. Grace nodded. The first Xorian scouts you damaged bought humanity valuable time. Without that, they might have launched a full invasion before we had any defenses. A door slid open, and Admiral Wilson entered with a team of military scientists. One of them, Dr. Olivia Patterson, carried a data tablet filled with readings. Captain Sullivan, we've completed our initial analysis of the Defiant, Dr. Patterson said, displaying a holographic projection of the ship. The temporal displacement has left its quantum signature unstable. It exists slightly out of phase with our normal space-time. Joe frowned. Is that dangerous? Not immediately, Dr. Patterson replied. But it does cause occasional system malfunctions. More importantly, it makes the ship's energy signature nearly undetectable to standard Xorian scanners. Admiral Wilson stepped forward. We've also analyzed the Defiant's weapons systems. They're unlike anything we've developed in the 15 years since your disappearance. Our research took different paths. Grace realized. The Defiant has technology the Xorians have never encountered. Exactly, the Admiral confirmed. Your ship's phase cannons operate on frequencies the Xorians have no defenses against, and your shield harmonics are completely different from our current fleet. Joe looked thoughtful. The Defiant was state-of-the-art when we left. Are you saying our old ship is actually more effective against these aliens than your new ones? In some ways, yes, Dr. Patterson said. It's like bringing an ancient weapon to a modern battlefield. The enemy has no counters for it, because they've never seen it before. Grace turned back to the window. How soon can we get her operational? That's why we're here, Admiral Wilson said. We're recommissioning the Defiant with immediate effect. Captain Sullivan, you're being reinstated as her commanding officer. Grace felt a surge of emotion. After 15 years of nightmares and regrets, she would command her ship once more. What about my crew? She asked. Those who are medically cleared will remain aboard, Wilson replied. We'll supplement with specialists who understand the current situation with the Xorians. In the ship's medical bay, Lieutenant Commander Ben Russell watched as the crew received their new orders. Despite their injuries and the shock of their time displacement, there was a growing sense of purpose among them. We're going back into service, he told a group of officers gathered around his bed. Captain Sullivan is returning to command. Amy Nichols, the communications officer, looked concerned. We just fought a battle we barely survived. Now we're jumping into a war that's been going on for a decade. We're soldiers, Ben replied simply. And apparently, we're exactly what humanity needs right now. In another part of the outpost, military technicians were loading the Defiant with updated star charts and tactical information about the Xorians. The ship's computers were being upgraded to interface with modern systems while preserving its unique original technology. Grace walked through the corridors of her ship for the first time in 15 years. Each room held memories, some joyful, some painful. She ran her hand along the wall of the bridge, feeling the subtle vibration of the engines coming back to life. "Welcome home, Captain," Joe said, joining her on the bridge. "It's good to be back," Grace replied, settling into the command chair. "Now let's get this ship ready for battle. We have a war to win." The U.S. Defiant hummed with energy as final repairs were completed. Over the past 3 days, military engineers had worked around the clock to make the warship battle-ready. The ship's unique weapon systems had been carefully preserved, while navigation and communication systems were updated to modern standards. Captain Grace Sullivan stood on the bridge, watching her crew prepare for their first mission. Some wore bandages from injuries sustained in their last battle, a battle that for them had happened just days ago, though it was 15 years in the past for everyone else. "Engineering reports all systems operational, Captain," Joe Ramirez announced from his station. His injuries were healing well, and he had insisted on returning to duty despite doctors' recommendations. "Weapon systems are online," added Tactical Officer Kevin White. "Phase cannons charged at 98% capacity." Grace nodded. "Prepare for departure. Our orders are to join Earth's defense fleet in the Orient sector." Lieutenant Commander Ben Russell, now serving as her executive officer, approached with a datapad. "The crew is ready, Captain. All departments report good to go." "Thank you, XO." Grace took her place in the command chair. It felt right to be back where she belonged. Communications, inform outpost control we're ready for departure. Amy Nichols nodded, her fingers moving across her console. Suddenly, she frowned and adjusted her earpiece. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," she said. "A signal on an unusual frequency." "Source?" Grace asked. "Unknown. It's not coming through standard channels." Amy worked her controls with practiced precision. "It's almost like it's resonating with the ship itself." Dr. Olivia Patterson, the science officer assigned to help the crew understand their temporal displacement, moved to Amy's station. She studied the readings, her eyes widening. "This is remarkable," she said. "The signal is on a quantum frequency that matches the Defiant's temporal signature." Joe looked up from his engineering station. "In English, Doc. The signal is on a wavelength that only a temporally displaced object could detect," Dr. Patterson explained. "I believe it's specifically attuned to the Defiant's unique quantum state." Grace stood. "Can you decode it?" "Working on it now," Amy replied, her fingers flying over her console. The bridge fell silent as everyone waited. Finally, Amy looked up, her face pale. "It's a distress call from Proxima Station," she said. "They're under attack by a massive Torian fleet. Their defenses are failing." Ben frowned. "Proxima Station. That's not in our orders. It's on the other side of human space." "Play the message," Grace ordered. Admiral John Carter's face appeared on the main screen. He looked exhausted, with cuts on his face and smoke visible behind him. "This is an emergency broadcast on all quantum frequencies," he said. "Proxima Station is under attack by the main Xorian fleet. Our defenses are failing. We estimate 6 hours before total shield collapse. Any human vessels receiving this message, we need immediate assistance. This is our last stand." The message repeated, then ended. "Check the timestamp," Grace said quietly. "Message was sent 40 minutes ago," Amy confirmed. Dr. Patterson looked troubled. "Captain, this quantum beacon technology. I've never seen anything like it. Somehow they've created a signal that can pierce normal space-time limitations. And the Defiant is the only ship that can detect it, Grace realized, because of our temporal displacement. Ben studied the tactical map. Proxima Station is 4 days away at maximum warp. Even if we left now, we'd never make it in time. Maybe we can, Joe said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. The Defiant's propulsion system was experimental, remember? It was designed for short bursts of extreme speed. We called it sprint drive. That system was unstable, Grace reminded him. That's why it was never deployed fleet-wide. Yes, but combined with our temporal instability. Joe was already calculating on his console. I think I could modify the drive to use our quantum displacement as an advantage. We might be able to make micro-jumps through subspace that would get us there in hours, not days. Would that be safe? Ben asked skeptically. Joe shrugged. Define safe. It would be risky as hell, but possible. A communication alert sounded. Admiral Wilson appeared on screen. Captain Sullivan, your departure time to join Earth's defense fleet has passed. Explain the delay. Grace glanced at her crew, then made her decision. Admiral, we've received a distress call from Proxima Station. They're under attack and won't last much longer. Proxima. Wilson looked confused. We've received no such communication. Grace took a deep breath. With respect, Admiral, my crew and I are already ghosts. Everyone thought we died 15 years ago. If we can save Proxima Station, that's thousands of lives. I understand your feelings, Captain, but my decision is final. Proceed to the Orion sector as ordered. The communication ended. The bridge was silent. Grace looked at each of her officers in turn. They had all heard the exchange. Options? She asked simply. Ben stood straighter. Ma'am, I believe there might be a communication malfunction preventing us from receiving the Admiral's latest orders. A small smile touched Grace's lips. Is that so, XO? Yes, Captain. Amy joined in. I'm having trouble with all outgoing communications as well. One by one, each officer on the bridge indicated their support. They were with her, whatever she decided. Grace returned to her command chair. Navigation. Set course for Proxima Station. Engineer Ramirez, prepare the sprint drive for your modified jumps. The U.S. Defiant broke orbit from Outpost 47, accelerating rapidly. On the bridge, Grace watched as multiple alert signals appeared on the tactical display. Captain, we're being hailed by 3 Earth defense vessels, Amy reported. They're ordering us to stand down immediately. No response. Grace ordered. Joe, how soon can we engage the sprint drive? Joe's fingers flew over his engineering console. 2 minutes. I need to recalibrate the quantum harmonics first. Incoming vessels are launching pursuit craft, Kevin warned from Tactical. They'll be in weapons range in 90 seconds. Grace straightened in her command chair. All hands. This is the captain. We are responding to a distress call from Proxima Station. Our mission is unsanctioned but necessary. Anyone who wishes to stay behind will not face disciplinary action. For those continuing with us, prepare for sprint jump. Nobody move to leave their stations. Pursuit craft are locking weapons, Kevin reported. Evasive pattern Delta, Grace commanded. Maintain course for jump coordinates. The Defiant swerved gracefully, its experimental engines giving it speed and maneuverability beyond standard military vessels. Warning shots flashed past the hull. Sprint drive charging, Joe announced. 80%. 90%. They're firing again, Kevin warned. Direct hit incoming. The ship shuddered as energy blasts struck the aft shields. Shields holding, Ben reported. Minimal damage. Sprint drive ready, Joe called out. Grace nodded. Engage. The stars outside the viewscreen suddenly stretched into lines, then darkness enveloped the ship. A strange vibration ran through the hull, different from normal warp travel. The lights flickered, and several consoles sparked. Status. Grace demanded. "We've made our first micro-jump," Joe reported, his voice tense. 5 more to go. Each jump takes us about 16 light-years. Dr. Patterson moved to his side, checking readings on a handheld scanner. The temporal field around the ship is becoming more unstable with each jump. The quantum distortion is increasing. "Is it dangerous?" Grace asked. "Yes," Patterson replied bluntly. "We're essentially tearing holes in space-time. I'm detecting temporal energy building up in the deflector array." Joe looked up. "Captain, I think we could use this. If we channel the temporal energy through the main deflector, we could create a weapon that disrupts the Xorians' timeline." "Explain," Grace said. "The weapon would create localized time distortions," Joe said. "It could age their ships' hulls by centuries in seconds or trap them in temporal stasis." "Would it work on their crystalline structures?" Ben asked. "In theory, yes," Joe replied. "But there's a risk. Creating such a large temporal distortion could tear the Defiant apart." Grace considered this. "Work on it, but only as a last resort." The ship shuddered violently as they completed their second jump. Sparks flew from the ceiling, and emergency lights activated. "Hull integrity at 87%, Kevin reported. "These jumps are putting extreme stress on the ship's structure." "Can we take 3 more?" Grace asked Joe. "We'll have to," he replied grimly. Preparing for third jump. In the hours that followed, the Defiant made its desperate journey through a series of sprint jumps. Each transition was rougher than the last. Equipment failed, systems overloaded, and the ship's quantum signature grew increasingly unstable. Between jumps, crew members recorded personal messages for families they might never see again. Some had learned that their loved ones had moved on during the 15 years they were missing. Others discovered children who had grown up without them, or parents who had passed away. Their messages were a mixture of regret, hope, and determination. Grace recorded her own message, sitting alone in her quarters during the brief rest period between the 4th and 5th jumps. "If anyone finds this recording," she began, "I want it known that the crew of the U.S. Defiant acted with extraordinary courage. We chose this mission knowing the risks. Some might call it disobedience, but we call it duty. Proxima Station represents thousands of human lives. We couldn't turn our backs on them, even at the cost of our own." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "To those who thought us lost 15 years ago and mourned us, I am sorry for the pain you endured. But perhaps it was fate that brought us here, to this moment, when humanity needed us most." The ship alarm sounded, signaling the preparation for the final jump. "This is Captain Grace Sullivan, signing off. Whatever happens next, know that the Defiant fought until the end." She closed the recording and returned to the bridge. The crew looked exhausted but determined as they prepared for the final sprint. "All stations report ready," Ben informed her. "Very well." Grace took her seat. "Engage final jump." As the Defiant made its last desperate leap through space, the main view screen flickered to life, showing their destination. Proxima Station hung in space, surrounded by the massive Xorian fleet. The station's shields were visibly failing, sections blinking in and out as they absorbed relentless enemy fire. "We made it," Amy whispered. "Just in time." Grace's voice was steady as she gave her order. "Battle stations." The U.S. Defiant dropped out of its final sprint jump into chaos. The space around Proxima Station blazed with weapons fire as the last human ships fought desperately against the overwhelming Xorian fleet. Crystal-like alien vessels surrounded the station, their energy beams cutting through the weakening shields. "Tactical analysis," Grace ordered calmly. Kevin studied his console. 6 human ships still operational. Xorian fleet consists of 23 major warships and numerous smaller craft. Station shields at 22% and failing. "They haven't noticed us yet," Ben observed. "Our temporal displacement is making us hard to detect." Grace nodded. "Let's use that advantage. Weapons, target the 3 Xorian vessels nearest the station. Fire phase cannons, full power." The Defiant's weapon systems came to life. firing beams of energy unlike anything seen in the current war. The phase cannon struck the first Xorian ship, bypassing its shields completely and slicing through its crystalline structure. The alien vessel shattered like glass. 2 more followed in quick succession. Inside Proxima Station, Admiral John Carter stared in disbelief at the tactical display. "Where did that ship come from?" he demanded. Commander Lisa Young shook her head in amazement. "It just appeared, sir. Our sensors barely detected it." She worked her console frantically. "Sir, it's the U.S. Defiant." "That's impossible," Carter whispered. "The Defiant was lost 15 years ago." The quantum beacon, Peter Mills realized. It worked. On the Defiant's bridge, Amy called out, "Captain, we're being hailed by Proxima Station." On screen, Grace ordered. Admiral Carter's stunned face appeared. "Defiant, identify yourself. Who commands that vessel?" "Admiral, this is Captain Grace Sullivan of the U.S. Defiant. We received your distress call, and we're here to help." Carter's expression showed both confusion and hope. "How is this possible? The Defiant was destroyed years ago." "It's a long story, Admiral," Grace replied. "But right now, we need to coordinate our attack. The Defiant's weapons are effective against the Xorians, but we can't take on their entire fleet alone." The ship rocked violently as enemy fire found its mark. The Xorians had recovered from their surprise and were now focusing their attack on this new threat. "Multiple impacts," Kevin reported. "Shields at 60% and dropping." Joe looked up from his engineering station. "Captain, the temporal weapon is ready, but using it will likely destroy the ship. The quantum instability is too great to contain." Grace nodded grimly. "We need to get closer to the center of their fleet for maximum effect." She opened a channel to Proxima Station again. "Admiral, we need your help. Can you create an electromagnetic pulse to temporarily disable the Xorian shields?" Carter nodded. "We can divert power from life support systems to create one massive pulse, but it will leave us defenseless afterward." "That's all we need," Grace assured him. "One clear shot." Grace turned to her crew. "All non-essential personnel to escape pods. Prepare for evacuation." "We're staying with you," Ben said firmly, and others nodded in agreement. Grace smiled at their loyalty. "Very well." Battle stations. The Defiant accelerated, dodging enemy fire as it plunged toward the heart of the Xorian fleet. Its phase cannons blazed continuously, destroying smaller craft that tried to block its path. "Station reports ready for electromagnetic pulse on your mark," Amy announced. "Tell them to wait for my signal," Grace ordered. "Joe, status of temporal weapon." "Charged and ready," he replied. "But the energy is becoming unstable. We'll only get one shot." The ship shuddered again as more enemy fire struck home. Warning lights flashed across every console. "Shields at 30%, Kevin reported. "Hull breaches on decks 3 and 4. "Almost there," Grace said, watching the tactical display as they approached the center of the enemy formation. "Now, Admiral, fire the pulse." Proxima Station glowed brightly as it released all its remaining power in one massive electromagnetic wave. The pulse washed over the Xorian fleet, temporarily disrupting their shields and weapons. "Now, Joe," Grace shouted. Joe activated the temporal weapon. The Defiant's deflector dish glowed with an unearthly blue light as it channeled the ship's unstable quantum energy outward. A wave of temporal energy expanded in all directions, enveloping the Xorian fleet. The effect was immediate and devastating. Some Xorian ships aged centuries and seconds, their crystalline structures growing brittle and crumbling. Others became trapped in localized time bubbles, frozen in place. Still others simply disintegrated as time itself became a weapon against them. On the Defiant's bridge, systems failed as the temporal energy backwashed through the ship. The lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency lighting. "What's happening to us?" Ben asked, gripping his console as the ship trembled violently. Dr. Patterson checked her readings. "We're being pulled into a temporal rift. The weapon has torn a hole in space-time. The last thing Grace saw before everything went white was the Saurian fleet in ruins and Proxima Station still standing. Whatever happened next, they had succeeded. 6 months later, Admiral John Carter stood on Proxima Station's observation deck. The station had been fully repaired, and Earth forces had used the victory at Proxima to turn the tide of the war. The Saurians were in retreat across all fronts. A communication officer rushed into the room. "Admiral, you need to see this. Long-range sensors have detected a signal, an old-style distress beacon." Carter studied the data. "Where is it coming from?" "Deep space, sir. Sector 117. Hours later, a search and rescue ship reported back. "Admiral, we found escape pods. They're from the U.S. Defiant." Carter smiled. "Bring them home."